live currently in Malaysia. I'm running an Islamic fund management company over there, whose headquarters is here. It's known as Saturna Capital. And we are the fund manager to the oldest and largest Sharia-compliant funds in the world, actually, known as the Amana Mutual Funds. We have 4 different funds here in the U.S. I'll let Amjad explain more, but our first one was started in 1986, which was the Amana Income Fund. Second one, Amana Growth, was 1994. Third one was the Developing World Fund, which led me to Malaysia. This was in 2009. And then recently, as of last year, we launched the Amana Participation Fund, which is more of a kind of income product to round out our suite. Inshallah, what I'd like to do in this presentation, we'll go through a lot of the Islamic finance and those type of things. Our first speaker that we're going to have is really going to talk about the use of awqaf, the use of trusts and those type of things to be able to build a long-lasting sustainability within our community. He'll talk a little bit about maybe social responsibility, environment, social governance, and those type of things. His name is Omar Mughal. He is actually a professor at the University of Connecticut and also on the board of Hartford Seminary, if you know. And for a long time, he's been a practitioner in the Islamic finance space in the area of law. Inshallah, so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Omar. We'll take the first part, and then what we'll do is we'll actually have his presentation. We'll do a Q&A, very brief, and then we'll turn over to the next speaker. So I'll come back on again as we're introducing the following speaker after that. So with that, inshallah, I'll turn it over to Omar, and he can begin, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Abad. Jazakallah khair to the Masjid Board and Sheikh Arsalan and the community for inviting us here, and I'm grateful for your attendance and having come out on a Sunday night to hopefully have a good, lively, transparent and honest discussion about the subject matter. So I like to, not that I've spoken very often on this topic, but I like to tell a little story about something that, a conversation that I was a part of some years ago. A masjid was being expanded, and the community had apparently gone beyond its means in doing so. Donations had slowed down, construction had to slow down as a result, and it might be too late for bank financing. And so one of the people in charge of the masjid, he said to me, "Brother, we need the money now." He was looking for suggestions. The statement had come in reply to a suggestion. Why not take the land you have, gather investors, and build a small commercial retail space, maybe a grocery or a donut shop, some simple stores like this, maybe some pizza. Drop those assets into a trust, and some of the income or all of the income, whatever it might be, could be earmarked to support the masjid in this case, and it could support it long term. We could, I thought to myself, even look at some kind of tax exempt, what they call an Islamic bond, a sukuk. But the community had to make a decision based on the immediate term. It had placed itself in a position of great risk. A year later, the masjid, was finished. They had to borrow money from a bank. And a year later, also nearby, a small strip mall opened up. It seemed to be doing quite well from my observation, but it had nothing to do with the Muslim community. So I'm seeing more and more over the last year or two, Islamic centers and masajid being mortgaged to support bank financing. Sometimes conventional, sometimes Sharia compliant structures. That's not something I recall happening from my parents' generation, where they simply built masajid on the basis of pure donations. To be fair, I don't have data on this. I don't know how common this is, but I see it as an individual, as a lawyer. Are we not generous enough as a community? What does it mean to pray and to organize ourselves in a place built on riba? have our needs exceeded our means? Is that because our needs are legitimate, or because we're living outside of our capacity? In other words, we're not living in a sustainable fashion? Or do we like to use other people's money to fund our consumption? And are we thinking about the future in a right way? So debt can be a form of servitude. Debtor-creditor relationships, they divide because they're not partnerships. As tempting as it might be to discuss whether the financing relied upon by some communities is riba or not riba, that's not really the point of my talk. What is concerning is that if payments are missed, if guarantors fail to step up, if there is some other default, the masjid could be taken away. It's been pledged, after all, as security for the repayment of the financing. And a masjid closure is not something we're supposed to allow to happen. And it seems the community here, this is my first time in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it seems the communities here are very robust, so you may very well not have this problem. But the lack of participation, the lack of attendance in masajid is not an uncommon problem in the U.S. So perhaps we will see in our lifetime some masjids shut down the way we saw other houses of worship having to close down. So these centers and their various communities need to be sustained and sustainable. Communities have to educate themselves, I suggest, by other communities and by experts as to how institutions, not merely the four walls, but institutions, how they are built, how they are maintained, and how they are grown. Why some thrive, why some fail, and why most sort of muddle along in mediocrity. So what does any of this have to do with Islamic finance? And what does it mean for us to live sustainably? What does it mean for our businesses to be sustainable? And why is that relevant again to Islam or to Islamic finance? So Islamic finance, very briefly, to me is a marketplace that offers itself as a way of doing business in accordance with the Sharia. We often see the marketing Sharia compliant. It is more often than not an attempt to structure debt or leverage in a manner that has certain features of equity and retains sufficient functionality of debt. Studies are showing that many people within Islamic finance, customers, practitioners, the scholars, so forth, all across the world are wondering why Islamic finance seems not to have produced significant positive social and economic impact. Surveys that are being done academically and by, sort of the quasi-academic reflect an expectation that Islamic finance should produce a just, balanced, participatory social economy, that it should be addressing poverty, that it should be addressing underdevelopment, that it should bring about greater wealth distribution, and so on and so forth. And this is very much consistent with at least the theories of Islam and Islamic finance and our historical practices, at least from certain time periods. The values, the ethics that we have of compassion, of rahmah, balance, fairness, and moderation, these underlie all of the ahkam and all of the teachings of Islam. Social responsibility, caring for our fellow man, our fellow human, caring for the environment, for the animals, caring for the non-living creation, should be methods and consequences of any commerce that is conducted in light of Islamic teachings. And yet Islamic investors have neither fully expressed these values nor been given the opportunity to do so. So I think that we are here in the U.S. in an advantageous position where we can reorient, reframe, and sort of redefine what Islamic finance means. So that we can implement more of its teachings, both the details and the universals. By finding our history in the present, we may model mechanisms to express this care and this concern for the creation of Allah in how we earn, how we consume, how we invest, and how we do business in any sense, in any manner. So let's take up a few areas. First, this idea of I've used this word, I think I used the word stakeholder. A stakeholder is someone that has an interest or a right in some affair, because there's a lot of consistency with Islam in these markets. As they debate stakeholder theory, To whom does a business owe its duties? To whom does it owe responsibility? I think Islam has quite a bit to offer these markets, as it expresses a concern, and we see it in our Sharia, for various communities across God's creation. Animals, natural environment, workers, laborers, not only a moral claim, but a legal claim. So we begin by thinking about who are the stakeholders of a business: board members, staff, shareholders, customers, neighbors, other faith communities, employees, suppliers, distributors, the local community, the environment again. So this is a fairly typical list of stakeholders, and we can add stakeholders from the spiritual realm as well, such as angels, for example. Good governance, meaning how we operate our business, how decisions are made, what the processes that are used, means beginning with leaders who are available, who are approachable, who are held responsible, and they design frameworks that take into account spirituality. First, muhasaba, for example, self-assessment, and muraqaba, an awareness of God's awareness of our inner workings. Governance mechanisms that systematically consult and include stakeholders. So, for example, all of you may be stakeholders for an Islamic finance offering in this area. So you should be consulted and your views, considered at the very least. This kind of transparency that we should inculcate in how decisions are made transforms the I that we often talk about, I, or me, into a we. And confident and capable business leaders, they create spaces where stakeholders can openly debate and discuss issues, and where stakeholders can regularly provide feedback and share knowledge and experience to construct wiser, more informed, and more inclusive, and thus more widely respected decisions. Being open to feedback is critical to learning, improving, growing, and sustaining. This is, as you probably all are very well aware, shura, both a principle and a method of decision-making taught in the Quran, demonstrated, for example, by Allah in His conversation with angels upon His creation of Adam alayhi salam, and practiced by prophets such as Ibrahim with his son when he was given the command to sacrifice him. May God's blessings be upon both of them. And numerous examples from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam in numerous situations. It is also practiced today by many non-Muslim organizations in business and in the not-for-profit world. So it's probably easier to talk about principles and harder to actually implement them in realities where our vested interests, prevent us or influence our ability to engage one another, to listen to one another, and sometimes even to properly follow other aspects, I should say, of the Sharia. So this is perhaps where the real task lies. So I'll try to give a few examples. For a business, for example, we can talk about Muslim community organizations, but we'll try to limit it to business, inshallah. For a business, it means using empathy and benevolence, that love and caring for one another that is taught in various texts. And there are studies and so forth, again, not necessarily all from the Muslim world, that show how empathy and benevolence, caring for others, produces better products, produces better processes, how considering your counterparty, the person on the other side of the table, maybe you're a buyer and they're a seller, so that person on the other side of the table, how considering them also, maybe you're collecting or paying a debt, setting precedent for how we treat our workers, and how we as workers treat our employers. Right? It's not always only about the employees. The employers have rights as well. And appreciating the local community. And by local community, I don't just mean the Muslim community. I mean the broader, physical place in which you live and work and the creation that exists within it. By contributing to all of them in a thoughtful manner. For individuals, it means contributing constructively as customers. Protecting employer rights we talked about. It means giving and sharing and planning for future generations, both individually and institutionally, when we arrange our own individual financial affairs and we think about the financial affairs for not only our businesses, but our community organizations. All of this requires that we forecast, we develop plans. And why? Well, first, because the Sharia insists that we think about consequences. Muslim businesses ought to rediscover the integration of the financial along with the social, affirmatively seeking out opportunities and making efforts to achieve good. For many generations of Muslim history, social impact was created by way of awqaf, endowments or trusts that may, well, that's another historical, I'll skip that. Khair. These trusts, these awqaf, housed significant assets in Muslim communities and countries or jurisdictions throughout history. And Muslim businesses may contribute by partnering, by creating trusts, and having those trusts contribute back to the community. For example, a business might be concerned with local homelessness, or the need for food, or a soup kitchen, for example. That business's owner might place the business, or some of the business, or certain assets into a trust to support social needs. Or the business may create some kind of a partnership or relationship with a not-for-profit that's maybe addressing some social problem, some economic problem in the community, and might institutionalize that. So there's a regular flow of income to support addressing and trying to solve that social need in the broader community. Or it may be simply a group of individuals who gather together and form what they call a donor-advised fund, and then strategically and thoughtfully not only gather donations, but then spend them with a plan. Muslims, for example, it's been what can be tracked as of a couple of years ago, American Muslims donate about $250 million annually. And yet we have masajid, for example, that lack heating in winter. We have numerous social needs and in our own faith community, and what to say of the other faith communities and the other communities all around us. By linking trade and commerce with philanthropy, with charity and social progress, Muslim businesses and communities may demonstrate their iman. They may demonstrate aspects or values of their faith, learning from others, working with others, building their own institutions, and contributing to the wider communities in which they live and work. It also happens to be much better business, and it's been demonstrated to increase the bottom line for those who, that kind of motivation is important. It is time for communities to start, and some certainly have. I see quite a bit of forward thinking in my just couple of days in this area, but thinking about the operation of their masjids and their centers from a business perspective. I don't mean to say that they should become profit centers, but they need to think about what it is that they need now, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and how to get to those points by creating and partnering with business so that business is contributing to the development, at least the financial development of those masajid or centers or other organizations, schools, so on and so forth. How am I doing on time? 10 minutes, wow, okay. So I've heard quite often, moving around, at least on the East Coast, that charity is just not enough to support our institutions, that we're struggling. So I wonder, when I hear this, how something so elemental to our faith, zakat, a pillar, sadaqah, something so broadly taught in so many texts, and as important in our social and religious history as awqaf, that can be so emphasized, so successful historically, how could it be insufficient for us? Perhaps there is something missing in our implementation. So answers first, I think, seem to depend upon what we mean by donations. And this is a long subject, but I'll just say maybe 1 or 2 sentences. Our institutions, I think, have to think differently about donations, for what purposes they are made and how they are spent. Our institutions must think differently and more systematically and long-term about creating donors and partnering with them, and thereby growing what is donated. Donors and donations have to be cultivated through creating, again, partnerships. We've used this word repeatedly. And we have to think how best to deploy charity when we give and when we receive. So the one who's received the donation has to think about how to deploy, but the one giving should be thinking also that what's being done with my money, how is that being done, what causes and what efforts are it furthering, and what kind of success do we see based on the plan and those involved and so forth. Again, and the donations and that financial development should be linked to the mission, the vision, and the strategic plan of the organization. Good governance and the right organizational culture marked by inclusiveness, consultation, and transparency, actually has been shown and found to help develop donors. So there are at least two vehicles in our Sharia, in our history, also, that find their parallel in U.S. laws that could be useful. First, and the shuyukh who are sitting here, please correct me when I make mistakes. The Sharia allows one to give up to 1/3 of one's estate upon death to those that one chooses, excluding those who are already entitled to receive a share designated by the Sharia. I bring this up because this is a far-reaching rule, to me at least. This again, we say, subhanAllah, shows the wisdom of the lawgiver. It teaches us to think about consequences. One could give this share or part of it to an adopted child, for example, to a school, an adoption agency. I think the first Muslim adoption agency was recently started in New York. Mosques, and to further some of the other social and environmental goods that we've talked about. This ties in with the idea of what is called planned giving. This has been long a critical component of religious institutions' development in the U.S., yet it seems to be a rarity amongst the American Muslim community thus far. Planned giving is a present decision, a decision made now to give a gift in the future, using certain tax planning techniques. There are various ways, and I don't think the technical details will be relevant at this point. We have not only to give strategically but thoughtfully, to think about how that 1/3 could be used best, whether within our family, whether within our immediate loved ones, those again who are entitled according to the Sharia to receive that, and beyond, and how we can make an impact for our faith and for the well-being of the creation. Individuals can also encourage further Sharia compliance by motivating businesses to be more responsible. A mutual fund manager, for instance, might be urged to lower the thresholds of debt that they tolerate when selecting companies, and adding socially and environmentally responsible criteria, so that businesses that have horrible labor practices or that pollute excessively are not deemed to be Islamic. On the home finance front, stakeholders may recommend, for example, forbearance and forgiveness to be contractually institutionalized features of a particular product. Our home finance products, our products generally, should reflect our values, and we should be able to easily explain this in about a sentence or two to someone who is not familiar, so that they can be successfully marketed and purchased and used by people of other communities as well, who would find fairness, maybe even beauty, in these financial products, and features they don't see and find on the whole elsewhere. For communities that find donations to be insufficient, or that seek to diversify or further grow their means, charitable endowments, trusts, awqaf in Arabic, may be used to create opportunities for tax benefits and investment opportunities for the local community. Businesses should help communities set aside assets to begin endowments, and periodically raise and put aside more for that purpose. Hopefully with prudent management, an endowment generates enough income to use for some portion of each year's operating budget without touching the initial corpus itself. An endowment might not only be for a physical structure. We have to, I think, move beyond only thinking about walls and ceilings to the development of human beings and of expertise that can go, that will be much more impactful in the medium and long term than the mere physical structure. I suggest that businesses and owners assess which assets are income producing, and they may very well identify that they have an idle asset, such as vacant land, that can be transformed with the right expertise into something that generates income, and that income can be earmarked towards some social good. Monim is staying, so I'm guessing. Okay, khair. So I'll wrap it up quickly then, inshallah. So an individual or business doesn't need to provide financing or obtain financing, is what I'm sort of saying, to be Islamic finance. What I'm sort of encouraging or suggesting is that we think about broadening our idea about business and Islam, so that it's not only or not just about that, but we add to it some of these other concepts. that we've talked about in terms of developing and demonstrating social responsibility and engendering impact. Any business and any individual can be transformed so that its business, how it interacts with money and assets, can be something that is loved by Allah. Doing so, again, we remind ourselves, is only a means, the goal of which is Allah. The same is true for generating income for community institutions, making them financially sustainable, while also helping community members create and preserve wealth. In the absence of order and organization, thoughtfulness and planning, resilience and sustainability, elements of beauty, we find in the absence of these things, we find division and dissolution and loss, spiritually, socially, and materially. And we remember that Allah is indeed beautiful and that He loves beauty. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair, Omar, for that, the presentation. Alhamdulillah, I mean, there's a lot of points that he actually brought up, so I don't want to spend too much time, but I do remember just one little anecdotal story, if I may. So I was in Los Angeles, north of the city. I don't know if you've been there. It's called Woodland Hills, California. Anybody ever been there? Okay, so I was sitting in a restaurant. It was a Chinese restaurant. And as I was ordering, was with a friend who actually happens to be from Dallas. His name is Mauraj. He actually went on to study Islamic. He got his PhD from Princeton. So anyway, we're sitting in a restaurant, we're eating, and I said, the motif over here looks really, really familiar, and I didn't know what it was. So I actually, when the waiter came, I talked to him a little bit, and I found out from the owner that actually restaurant used to be a masjid back in the early 1900s. The Chinese had, when they first came there, some of them were Muslim, actually had built a masjid, and that was the location for it, which now stood a Chinese restaurant. So it's a true story. I was there, that happened. And unfortunately, I think what he brings up a good point is that the sustainability part of it, which is that not only do we bring the people here, but how do we maintain the finances of the masajid? How do we maintain the finances of the institutions? All of those things are very important. And the oppressive nature of debt is such that, if we do actually take out a loan, then, if we can't make those payments for whatever reason, the masjid has the potential of being taken away from us. And so, there are evils of debt that we need to understand as well. So that was something that was there. So anyway, I don't want to babble. If there are any questions for Omar, please, let's ask them now. We'll give about 5 minutes for that, and then we'll turn it over to the next speaker. Did you have a question, brother? Alaikum salam.
I think there would be sort of two elements to how I would look at that. I do think that there is a growth in our approach to business that's required. I have come to believe that the biggest challenge facing Islamic finance is not things like changing rules or laws, because oftentimes they don't actually prevent you from doing something Islamic. It's we who prevent ourselves. So I think the biggest challenge to Islamic finance is the absence of spiritual development, tazkiyah, tasawwuf, whichever word you want to use in Arabic. I think spirituality is the great challenge to Islamic finance. I do think it does, require a bit of a change in mindset. I think we're seeing this change developing here in the U.S. across business. Since the financial crisis, socially responsible markets have been growing much faster than the irresponsible counterparts, because people have begun to appreciate the importance of good governance, positive environmental impact, looking after social needs, and that business and finance and corporations have a significant negative impact upon these considerations. So I think we see some of this changing. We see it particularly changing in the U.S. and Europe, and which is why I think in the U.S. American Muslims are in a particularly interesting position to be able to, find commonality with that and demonstrate their faith through that. I think that there are numerous businesses and asset managers that demonstrate in the medium to long term you can actually make more money when you do the right thing. For example, if you take into account your customers, you show them empathy, you show them benevolence, you ask for their opinions, you ask for their feedback, you're transparent and honest, and you explain things to them in a way that shows you value them as a human being, so on and so forth. Maybe if you show them that, hey, you've shown me you lost your job, you're in financial trouble, I'm going to make this easy on you for a few months, hopefully you get back on your feet. This builds reputation. This builds loyalty. And that translates into goodwill, which then translates into financial returns as well. But we do, I think, as you point out, have to stop thinking about the short term. And there are some studies that show that CEOs, not just of Islamic organizations, most of them wish that they didn't have to take into account short-term considerations, and they feel they could develop a better business if they didn't have to answer for the short term. So hopefully that's helpful. Jazakallah khair.
So anybody else have any questions or for Omar? So I did want to give you some positive news as well. So I haven't been in America for the U.S. for about 4 years, but even before that, there are actually institutions that are there that actually already have estate planning mechanisms in place. That in fact, when I was working with a lot of institutions on this, my only goal was to make sure that whatever they did was in the public domain. So if they came up with an estate planning tool to be able to help masajid or those type of things, that would be in the public domain. So two I just want to mention really quickly, three actually. The one which is very, very close by is the Islamic Society of Greater Houston. They actually do have an endowment fund, and they've been running that thing for about 15 to 20 years now. It's slowly growing. It's, obviously an endowment fund is something that, morbidly speaking, you have to wait for people to die before you actually get the money. So it's been growing by the number of constituents that have paid in. It hasn't grown because, mashallah, our community lives a long time, so it'll just take a while for that to happen. So that's the first part. That's number one, very close. The other one, which is, ISGH, it's a lot of masajid all grouped under one organization. The other one that I want to give you is the Islamic Society in North Carolina. It's a Raleigh, North Carolina. They actually have, ICOR actually has an endowment in the public domain. So if anybody ever calls and says, please can I get your founding documentation for your endowment or your awqaf, at least when I was there was a promise that they would give it to anybody who was willing to take it. So I would encourage those in the leadership position in Allen to be able to do that. And the last one is Islamic Society of North America. They've been running their trust ever since the mid-'80s from there. So Omar, do you have any last words before you...
Yeah, just to add on that, that was a really helpful and useful point. You could create some endowments, through donations while living. For example, at the Hartford Seminary, where I'm on the board, we just created an endowed chair, an academic position for a professor in a certain field of Islamic studies. So they raised, I think, $1.2 million, and that goes into an endowment specifically for that individual, that professor, to fund and support that professor and his research and studies and salary and so on. And this came from institutions and individuals that felt they were impacted by that area of Islam and wanted to support it while living. So it wasn't even the hopefully more will come in when at later times, but present generations still living were donating to some of these endowments as well.
Jazakallah, good point. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so one final time. Anybody have any questions? Okay, Jazakallah khair, Omar, for that presentation. Our next speaker is Amjad Qadri. Jazakallah khair. Amjad Qadri, who is with Saturna Capital. As I mentioned, Saturna it runs the oldest and largest Sharia-compliant mutual funds in the country, if not the world. The one thing I want to say before I turn the floor over to him And that is, that there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he says, may Allah have mercy on a man who earns his money in a halal way, who spends it economically, and then he saves some of it for a day when he needs it. And so I think for this topic, what we're really talking about is the last third of this hadith that I mentioned, which is saving some money for a day when you need it. So inshallah, with that, I'll turn it over to Amjad, and he can go from there. Jazakallah khair.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله. Inshallah, as Moni mentioned, I will be talking about savings in terms of either education fund, retirement fund, things along those lines. And with anything that has to do with the market or stocks along those lines, there's always disclosures that come with them. I have to tell you that any numbers that I may use are historical numbers or numbers as example. There's no guarantees of future returns. And inshallah, any type of representations I do are based on things that have happened in the past. As saying goes that I used to hear on the radio, historical returns are no guarantees of future returns. And even as an Islamic concept, when it comes to savings and getting returns, there's usually a concept of having no guarantees. It's a lot of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you as risk, and inshallah with that also barakah and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases you. So if we can first think about some reasons of why you would want to save. If there's anyone in the audience, we see a few on the board for home, for Hajj, for children's education, for retirement. Is there anything else that anyone can think of? Well, a few others might be a car, something along those lines, another big investment that you want to do. But these are some of the reasons to save, and these are some of the reasons to start thinking about saving. And inshallah, I'll go into a few more details of why it's important to save in a couple of slides that are coming up. My goal today, inshallah, is a few. One is to help everyone understand the importance of saving using Sharia guidelines and the complications of Sharia guidelines. Two is to help people understand why it's important to save. And three is to help everyone understand, including myself, why it's important to save earlier on rather than waiting till later. So the first one is Islamic investments and guidelines. We all, I'm sure, here would say, if it came time to invest, or if someone came to us locally and said, oh, you know what, I'm going to open a convenience store nearby, and I'm also going to sell alcohol, I'm assuming most of us here would say no, and they ask for investments, we would say, no, we can't invest in that, you're selling alcohol. The sad reality is that most of us might have alcohol in our portfolios right now, things that we can control in the form of our 401k accounts or our retirement accounts. So I would encourage everyone that would not want to invest in a alcohol store or a store that sells alcohol to really consider going through your 401k account that you have control over and see if there is anything, and inshallah we'll be happy to help you figure out how to diversify that so you're not in it. So when it comes to guidelines, as I mentioned alcohol, there are a few things that you do not want to invest in at all as Muslims. We don't want to invest in interest, banking, riba, financial institutions, anyone that is taking risk along those lines, alcohol, gambling, pork, and pornography. So when it comes to mutual funds, and let me just define mutual funds are a group of stocks that get invested for a defined goal. So a group of individuals get together and they say, we want to start a mutual fund for, biotech. And so if they want to do a biotech mutual funds, then their goal is to only buy biotechnology funds. If someone says, I want to do technology startups in Silicon Valley, then they would only have stocks of startups in Silicon Valley. So when the Islamic fund started about 29 years ago, there's a group of Muslims that got together. When they went to the bank, the bankers always said, you have all this money in your checking account, why don't you put it in a savings account or a CD? And they wanted an alternative for Muslims so that they had a way of trying to help build their wealth or invest in it somewhere where they can get some halal returns and there wouldn't be interest. So they got together and they said, okay, we need to come up with an Islamic criteria. So the first criteria was something simple that we can all do. But then the Islamic scholars, North American Fiqh Council, they came up with some more standards, and these standards are universally agreed upon in organizations like IOFI and things along those lines. that are adopted for the different countries that they're in. So one of them is a company can't have more than 33% debt. They can't have more than 45% in accounts receivable, and they can't have more than 5% in haram revenues from a secondary income source. So let me explain that. Let me see a show of hands of how many people think that investing in airlines like Southwest Airlines is halal. Okay, about half the room. So Southwest Airlines is in the business of travel. So it meets the first criteria. It's not in any of the haram things. Now, in the second criteria, is it 33% debt? I'd have to look that up to be sure. I think it's not. Is it 45% in accounts receivable? Possibly. In the third criteria, Southwest Airlines sells what on their plane that might be a problem? Alcohol. So them selling alcohol, would that make it automatically so that we can't buy it? It would not. It would have to be more than 5% of their income. Because Southwest Airlines is in the business of transportation, then Southwest Airlines, on the basis, on its surface, it's okay to own. Then you have to see between alcohol sales and possible interest income or anything else that they're doing that's haram, is that secondary sources of income, is it more than 5%? If it is, then we can't own Southwest Airlines. Let me take another example, though, of something that we all might believe in could be halal. How many people think Bed Bath & Beyond is halal to invest in? Just show of hands again real quick. So we have, again, about half the room. So Bed Bath & Beyond sells towels and bath and bed stuff. They were halal to own. What happened is they started selling wine in their spa section of their restaurant. It's probably less than 5% of their income because that's not what they do. But what they do is they buy and sell primarily as their business. So they buy and sell goods. Wine is a good that they're buying and selling. As soon as they add wine, even if it's less than 5%, you can no longer own Bed Bath & Beyond because of the fact that they are buying and selling, and they're selling alcohol. So it becomes part of their primary business. So this is the perfect slide I wanted to get to. So the first, I told you again, there's three things that I wanted everyone to be able to get. The first one was the Sharia filters and seeing how complicated they are. I think we can all agree the first filter is very easy. We'll know if something is halal or haram. The second filter is between the debt and also how much of their secondary income is halal. That might be harder for us to find out. The second thing that I want everyone to understand is this graph here. It might be a little bit hard to see, but this graph helps illustrate the idea of investing early. So for those of us with children, for those of us that are thinking about retirement, it shows that if someone was investing about $1,000 a year with an average return of 7%, if they started at the age of 25, by the time they retired at 65, they would have 213. If they started at the age of 35, they would have about 100,000, and at 45, they would have 43,000. So here we can see a clear example of if you start investing early, you will have more to invest, even if you do the same amount every year. Now, obviously, most of us would probably want to increase this and put more away, 2,000 or 3,000, so that we had enough for retirement. But it's really important to understand why it's important to save early. And not just saving early, but why it's important to save on our own in our 401ks. Let me get a show of hands of how much someone thinks Social Security will help in retirement. How much do you think you'll get on a monthly basis? $400 a month? That's a good guess. Anyone else? 3,000, depending on what your income is. Anyone else? 700. Okay. So I read a study, I think it was AARP, that said the average amount that someone gets in Social Security is about $900 and a little bit. Let's say $950 a month. So, mashallah, you guys are in Texas. You're blessed. It's warm outside all the time. I come from Chicago. It's freezing. We had negative 20-degree wind chills just a couple of weeks ago. So you need to be in a nice warm place, especially in the wintertime. Here, if you have a little breezy house or something like that, you might be able to get by. But let's imagine living on $950 a month. So now you need to rent a place. Or even if you own a place, let's imagine our expenses. For renting a place, even if it's a small 2-bedroom, because as you're older, you probably still want some room. How many people imagine that as they get older, their lifestyle will go down? It doesn't seem like anyone will. How many people think that their lifestyle will go up, that they'll start traveling more when they get older? A lot of people are nodding their head yes. Monim's raising his hands. How many people are thinking they want to go to Hajj and Umrah more when they get older? You people, again, are thinking yes for that. So are you thinking that if you earn less income, you'll be able to do that? I want everyone to think about this. So if right now you're making about $70,000 a year, when you retire, you probably have to continue to make $70,000 a year to do what you want to do. So please think about this, because Social Security, as we said, only will give you about $11,000 a year. So you need to make up for the other $60,000 if that's the lifestyle you're used to living. How many people here donate to the masjid? I'm sure most of you do. Help relatives. When someone needs some help, they help them out. You want to continue to be able to do that when you get older. Again, that's why it's very important for us to be able to make sure that our income level stays the same. And the only way it's going to do that is if we make it a priority to save. So again, also saving early. So making it a priority to save, knowing that Social Security only does $950, and let's say we rent a 2-bedroom. How much is a 2-bedroom here, Raza? I mean, you're familiar with the area. 2-bedroom apartment. So let's say $900. You're left with $50 a month. That will maybe cover your energy costs because, you know, in the wintertime maybe you don't need as much because it stays a little cool. You don't need to run the AC. In the summertime, I doubt it if you want to be cool in your house with the Texas summers that you'll be able to do it. But let's say it covers all of that. Then where's your money for gas, for food, for cell phone, for helping other people, for donating to the masjid, for helping relatives? Let's say your kids come by and they say, hey, Baba, you know, or you have grandkids, you want to give them Eid and you want to buy them presents in Eid and you want to get them something for graduation. So all these things we have to keep in mind. So we know Social Security is not going to do it, and we know there's a large gap we need to fill. And let's say even we can somehow do it. Let's say your car breaks down. You bought a car 10 years before retirement, running great. 10 years into retirement, your car breaks down. Now all of a sudden there's no extra income. So I say all of this because talking to a lot of my friends, talking to the Muslim community around the country, I realize when it comes to saving for retirement, Muslims just believe some kind of magic is going to happen. And that's not the case. I mean, Monim shared a beautiful hadith with us. The Prophet ﷺ also told us to live as if we're going to die today, but to plan as if we're going to live for a long time. So I want everyone in this room that when they leave today, they make the intention that at a minimum, mind you, I'm saying minimum, whatever you are paying for your cell phone bill, even if it's for the whole family, at a minimum, you decide you're going to do that on a monthly basis in a retirement account. So now that's just to help you in retirement. Now if you're young, you have kids that haven't gone to college yet, you have to take the same numbers. And you have to think, okay, in the next 18 years, so you'll have about a 20-year gap. You know, if I put away $1,000, I'll have $101,000. So when we went to college, year over year, you'll notice that college tuition has gone up. How many people think $100,000 will be sufficient for a 4-year college if we wanted to help our kids throughout the whole time? It doesn't seem, it's $100,000 is enough? In Texas, is that true, Raza? Okay. I know Texas has some programs that help Texas state schools. I know Texas, mashallah, as a state, has some programs that help. I can tell you that's not in Illinois. I know that Texas specifically has some really good programs that help, and that's a wonderful thing about Texas. So inshallah, a lot of our community can deal with that. So going back, so in retirement, we talked about Social Security benefits. We talked about decreased dependence on anyone else's income stream, and then also about being able to help other people. And then we're able to talk about saving early and why it's important to save. So those are a few of the points that I really wanted to cover for our presentation today. And now some of the ways that you can save, and inshallah this will be my last slide, and then I'll open it up for questions and answers, is there are different type of platforms you can save from. For retirement, there is a traditional or a Roth IRA. They both come with benefits, and I don't go into deep details about each of these because everyone's situation is different, but I'll talk about these two just so people have an understanding, because this is what gets talked about a lot. So when it comes to retirement, now, since we've already established that we would like to see our income stay the same or very close to the same, and we've established that Social Security will not do that for us, we'll have to find secondary source, some kind of retirement benefits that we have, then we will probably be in the same tax bracket. So let's say we're making $75,000 to $100,000 a year, so we're going to be in a very high tax bracket even when we retire because, mashallah, we're having good income coming in. So if that is true, then we want to try to get some non-taxed income coming in as much as possible. And the way you can do that is with a traditional IRA, when you put money in, that is money that, with the Roth IRA, with the Roth IRA, it's post-tax money. So it's money that you get from a W-2 that after you've already paid taxes on it. When you put it into a Roth, when you take it out at retirement, it does not get taxed. Not the money you put in or the growth. So this is one way to decrease taxes. So let's say, we've maxed out a lot of our retirement benefits. Then we say, hey, listen, I'm still going to be making $75,000 when I retire. I'm still going to be in a high income. So I want to put away as much as I can in a Roth, because then at least I'll have some income, that's completely tax-free. And finally, the government can't get me. I know we're all trying to figure out a way the government can't get us, but they always find a way. So, if that's the way, then this is one way you can put away $5,500. I would highly encourage everyone. I think we've established that we want to stay in the same tax bracket, same income bracket, which means we'll be in the same tax bracket, to try to make sure that we get as much tax-free income as we can. The couple of other employer-sponsored plan are 401k, 403b, and for self-employed individuals, there's SEP and Simples. I don't go into a lot of details for this. If people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. With that, inshallah, I'm going to close. I didn't mention in detail college savings accounts. I know we talked about college savings going up, but we also have what's called the Coverdale accounts, which you can put $2,000 a year away. Inshallah, with that, you'll have about $200,000 if you go through the full 20-year cycle or even the 18-year cycle. The last thing that I want to mention before ending, though, is, Muslims, the other thing I notice outside of the fact that we haven't been good about saving for retirement, many people are scared of the stock market. One reason is because they don't want to invest in something haram. That I completely understand, but I think a little bit of education or saying, hey, I want to go with a company that does Islamic filters and they've taken care of this will solve that problem. The second thing is, I think for some reason, we remember the bad times when the stock market goes down more than the good times. So I want to say, since the stock market's formation back in the early 1900s, it's gone up year on year on average about 6.5%. So even though it goes down, if you leave it in there for the long term, it goes up about 6.5%. So when I use the 7% return to show what would happen over 10 years or over 20 years, that's a good indication of kind of where it will be. Alhamdulillah, even our funds, the Amana Mutual Funds, for the last 10 years, our average is above 7%, very close to 7.5%. As Monim mentioned, we are one of the oldest and largest Islamic mutual funds in the world, actually, alhamdulillah, that the Muslims in America were able to make that progress. Jazakallahu khairan again for the community coming out. I have to say, this is a beautiful, beautiful masjid, mashallah. I've been to the Musalla 2 times, and that was very nice, but this is unbelievable. Jazakallahu khairan. With that, I'm going to open it up to questions because I will be leaving, inshallah, shortly. But if I can't answer the questions, Monim also works with us, and he can answer the questions probably better than me. I might even turn it over to him while you guys ask the questions. Reza, if you want to set up while I'm answering questions. Yes? A lot of times when it comes to these questions, the right strategy is what works best for you because you know your business life cycle best, right? If you know that every year your business slows down in the summertime and you need a little bit more cash to get through the summer, then it's probably not a good idea to jump your excess right before summer. With that being said, with the stock market, knowing it goes up and down, it's always good to put in a regular amount on a regular basis because as it goes up and down, you putting in on a monthly basis, when it goes down you put in, when it goes up you put in, so it averages out your returns. So ideally, and even the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is that if you do a consistent act that's small, it's better than trying to do it at the end. I think that, as well as I truly believe if you make a goal and say, I'm going to put away $500 a month, I'm going to put away $1,000 a month, once you do that, nothing else will change, but your money will get saved. Like, it won't affect your living lifestyle that much. It'll just be another bill that you get used to. And we really need to start treating our retirement like a bill. Because unless we do that, we keep putting it off. So if you don't pay your electricity, it goes off. You don't pay your cellular bill, it goes off. We need to think of retirement as a bill, make a bill for ourselves, tell ourselves $300, $400 a month, I'm going to put it away, and this is my bill, and I want to make sure that I do it. So I'm going to just kind of give you examples of different things that you can invest in, right? So, and you've mentioned a few already. You can invest in the stock market, and I told you historically what the stock market does overall, about 6.5% returns. You can invest in real estate, as you've mentioned, and real estate returns can vary depending on how much you get the property for and how much you're able to return it for. And then you can invest in local companies. Investing in local companies like a local gas station or a local meat market or a local restaurant is similar to investing in a stock market because you're investing in a company, but it's very local and you're not diversified. What the stock market gives you, especially in mutual funds, because usually in a mutual fund there's a minimum of 50 stocks, that what it gives you diversification. So if that local gas station goes out of business because that city goes away, then you've lost most of your money. But if you're invested in 50 gas stations, even if one ends up doing bad, you end up stabilizing. Same thing with real estate. Neighborhoods go up and down. But, when I say diversification, diversification is also in the assets. So the stock market is one way of diversifying. Real estate is one way of diversifying. Local business is one way of diversifying. Now, of the three things that I mentioned, I can tell you from my personal experience that, the first two, real estate and local businesses, will take up your time. And, if you're like myself, I have 3 kids at home, and I work full time, there isn't a lot of extra time. So, in trying to get rent and if there's maintenance issues, things like that, you can obviously hire a manager to do some of that stuff that takes away from your return. So you just have to weigh out, what you want to do, how much you have here, how much you have there. It's about making sure you have a diversified basket. And then the decision is up to you. Ideally, you want to look at all of your assets and decide what you want to do. Monam, do you want to chime in?
Sure. So I think Amjad did a great job. The only thing I would tell you is that as you're beginning to diversify, right, you can't go out there and buy real estate for $5 and then $50 a month thereafter. Right? I mean, you need a sizable amount of money. So what do you do with that money? That's something to think about. But if you have that money, the one major thing that Amjad didn't mention that I think is important is liquidity also. So if you need that money for some emergency purposes, you're going for Hajj, those type of things, then don't put it into somewhere where you can't sell it immediately. So keep that in the cash or put in the market, that type of thing. And then if you have extra money on top of that, then you can say, okay, well, you know what? even for 5 years, I don't need the money, I can get a good rate of return. Yeah, real estate is a good diversification, maybe other things might be a good idea. But until you can get to that stage, I wouldn't recommend it. Okay? Brother, on your question, just on the SEP, generally the rule is the earlier the save, the better. He mentioned that, right? And also that you can actually, there's a study that was done, I don't remember the exact numbers for it, but it was basically saving 1,000 at the beginning of the year for 20 years, or 1,000 at the end of the year for 20 years. And there's a huge difference in the calculation as well, over time. So what I would tell you is, whatever you can afford to do on a monthly basis, do it. And then play catch up at the end of the year. Okay? If you never start, then it's much harder for you to put in that extra money. But if you have a consistent going and you don't have the money at the end of the year, at least you've saved whatever you've done for the 12 months. Okay?
I have some pens here for everyone, inshallah, and then I have some brochures. I'll double check if I have some USB drives. If I do, I'll leave them here, inshallah. Go ahead. That is a very great question. As my friend here, Raza, knows, that guidance actually recently has tried to, or is in the process of, adding Amana on. I know Cisco and Intel, both of them, Cisco and Intel, right? Both of them added Amana mutual funds. The way that happened is a group of Muslims, because both of those places have a large group of Muslims that work there, went to HR and they said, hey, listen, we need ethical funds. And alhamdulillah, Amana Mutual Funds has a great track record. It's been around for 29 years. It's had good returns. It's beat the market majority of those years. So keeping that in mind, they wrote a letter to HR and they pushed the issue a little bit. So that's one way of getting Amana funds in your retirement. The second way is a lot of companies now, because of what happened with the crash and employees saying, hey, listen, you didn't give me enough options, they open up what's called a self-directed option. And what that does is it lets you invest wherever you want to. A lot of times when you hit that, you'll get all kinds of warnings. Be careful, don't do this, be afraid. And the reason for that is they're worried about people that are going to go in there and they're just going to buy Apple, or they're just going to buy Google. And then they don't diversify. But if you go in there and you buy mutual funds that are diversified, especially Islamic ones, then the companies feel much better. And this is growing as a trend. So either one of those things, either if you go and say, hey, we really need this fund or these funds, or if you say, can you just open the self-directed option, then one of those two things should, inshallah, be able. And I'll also leave some business cards. If you want some help with that, I can connect you with our retirement manager, and he can see about some letters that maybe we can get duplicates of what they use. So. Yes. Walaikum assalam. Well, AMJA, I know last year they had a conference for the home finance institutions. And when it comes to the investment institutions, our Sharia board has been for a long time the Fiqh Council of North America. Recently we hired a Sharia board out of Malaysia. Imani is the name of the group. So what they do is on a monthly and a quarterly basis, they look at what we have and they make sure that it fits within the Sharia criteria. We didn't go to AMJA because AMJA, mashallah, they are an institute of jurists that span many, many different fields. We went to people that were specific in Islamic finance. I think what you'll maybe learn a little bit from Raza's presentation is when it comes to Islamic finance, it's very complicated. It's like, when I went to school, I took biology. But to be honest with you, if you ask me right now about DNAs and chromosomes and what the DNA patterns is, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what comes first, X, Y, or whatever it is, or how those chromosomes go together. It's the same thing with Islamic finance, and I know this because when I talk to imams around the country, they'll say, look, we study Islamic finance, but we knew people were going to ask us about salah. They're going to ask us what breaks our fasting when we're fasting, what we have to do to make up for it. The Islamic finance, so the people that are experts in them, we decided to use them. So, alhamdulillah. So if you're self-employed, you have multiple options. You can either start a 401k, or you can just use either a SEP or a simple, and you'll have great tax advantages as well, because whatever you put into them, that will decrease your adjusted gross income. Again, you'd have to check with your accountant about this, but I'll leave my cards here, or maybe I'll talk to you on my way out, inshallah, and we can discuss that further. Also, Monem can, oh, here, did you want to add to that? Oh, okay. So I'll take the last question, and Monem, inshallah, will be able to answer any questions that I've missed, and I'll leave my cards here. If for some reason the cards run out, anyone, Raza, Uncle Salam, Monem can give you my number as well. Yes, brother. 403B is very similar to a 401k, but it's usually done by educational institutions or governments. Jazakallahu khairan. Those are some very good questions. So the first one is, as far as being sustainable, we do have a whole group of mutual funds now that are sustainable funds or green funds. Something that we've noticed at Amana is a majority of our stocks already meet that criteria because of the Islamic criteria. Now, it's not perfect and it's not a one-to-one, but I think as we continue to see the trend of green growing, that might be one of the things that we do soon. One of the new funds that we've launched, as Muslims get closer to retirement, 29 years ago when the first Amana fund started, alhamdulillah, the community was young and they were looking for growth sector stocks. Now, as the community is getting older and closer to retirement, you're looking for something that's less risky. Stocks are usually on the higher risk side. You're looking for things that are less risky. So we've recently just started what's a bond alternative, which is called a sukuk. It's called a participation fund. So, the more risky, the more returns generally. So with the riskier, especially our stock funds, we assume about a 7.5% return based on the last 10 years. Now, on our new participation fund, which as you get closer to retirement, they say if you're 60 years old, about 60%, 70% should be in a bond alternative like of instrument that is not as risky as stocks. So we're assuming about a 3% return from that. It's called the participation fund, and what it does is it invests in Islamic sukuks. So either Pakistan, highways in Pakistan, some kind of infrastructure projects in Turkey, some kind of airplane rental products by one of the Islamic companies in the Middle East, or the big ski resort that's in Dubai, the property management company, they want to buy another building, so they'll issue a sukuk, things along those lines. So we are looking at those. I don't know of any plans, and maybe Monem can answer this, about a REIT fund. I know many people have talked about it, but I don't know of one that's about to start at the moment, but as we're growing as a community, I definitely see the need for that, and inshallah we'll see someone do it. Monem, do you have any thoughts on that? Okay, with that, I'm going to end. Again, anyone can ask Monem, inshallah, even after the presentations. I do have a flight to catch because I have to be in D.C. tomorrow morning. But I'm going to leave my cards, and please come take some pens, and I'll let Raza get started.
Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I understand that Isha starts at 7:45, or is the Aqama time? 7:45? Okay. All right. I won't have a lot of time to go through it. I'll most likely try to encompass within a couple of minutes. When do you call Aqama? Right now, or? 7:45, okay. All right. Inshallah. So I'm going to start briefly and basically start with a small video presentation for about 2.5 minutes, and inshallah then I'll explain the concept in a short while, and then we'll do Isha, and then we'll have question and answers after that, inshallah. So first and foremost, I would like to thank the Shura board here at the masjid and Sheikh Arsalan and all the organizers here. Jazakallah khairun. Accomplishment is mashallah big here.
Market forces, economic policies, and our financial system are things most people don't bother paying attention to until they affect them personally. Between 2000 and 2010, there were three major bubbles that burst, which upset our financial system and created quite a bit of uncertainty in our everyday lives. As consumers, we're aware of the financial risks involved in our decisions, and now we're a little more inquisitive. For example, you're a potential homeowner, and you need to understand how home financing works and what types of risks are involved in the process. For that, we need to take a closer look.
Amjad, please take your iPad.
That sells money for more money. When you go to purchase a home, a traditional bank will happily lend you the cash you need, add interest, and they'll even pass along all the inherent risks of home ownership to you as a bonus. So in the event you fall victim to a natural disaster, eminent domain, or foreclosure, the burden to repay the full loan amount falls directly on you, with no one to help shoulder the load. Beyond its obvious shortcomings, lending and borrowing at interest is also in direct opposition to what all monotheistic faiths preach. There is, however, an alternative. Guidance Residential's declining balance co-ownership program is rooted in the traditional Islamic belief that money has no intrinsic value and thus can't be sold at a profit. The program is a non-lending method to facilitating home ownership. Through Guidance's co-ownership agreement, you purchased a home of your choice by entering into a diminishing partnership wherein your obligation is simple. You agree to buy out Guidance's shares while also paying a fee for using the portion of the property you do not yet own. As your ownership increases over time, the portion of your monthly payment dedicated to this rental condition decreases. What makes this better? You can fully buy out Guidance's shares at any time without a prepayment penalty. If you're late making a payment, you don't need to worry about the typical 5% late fee that traditional banks charge and profit off of. Our reminder fee of $50 or less covers our administrative costs and never compounds. In the event of default, Guidance will only reclaim its share from the sale of the property, whereas other institutions typically pursue you for any proceeds not covered by the sale of the home. Should the property be lost due to a situation involving something outside the two parties, like eminent domain or a natural disaster, Guidance will share equity loss equal to the percentage of our ownership. With Guidance Residential, you don't have to worry about the worst-case scenario. We're here to share the risk and benefits of owning a home with you. It's something we like to call modern finance with timeless values. Visit guidanceresidential.com.
So inshallah we're going to break for Iqama, and then inshallah after the Isha, inshallah we'll go with the program details.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salat. Hayya ala salat.
حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استقيموا واعتدلوا يرحمكم الله. Please straighten the lines and fill the gaps. Please fill the gaps. Come closer, stand shoulder to shoulder, please. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا الشمس كورت وإذا النجوم انكدرت وإذا الجبال سيرت وإذا العشار عطلت وإذا الوحوش حشرت وإذا البحار سجرت وإذا النفوس زوجت وإذا الموءودة سئلت بأي ذنب قتلت وإذا الصحف نشرت وإذا السماء كشطت وإذا الجحيم سعرت وإذا الجنة أزلفت علمت نفس ما أحضرت فلا أقسم بالخنس الجوار الكنس والليل إذا عسعس والصبح إذا تنفس إنه لقول رسول كريم ذي قوة عند ذي العرش مكين مطاع ثم أمين وما صاحبكم بمجنون ولقد رآه بالأفق المبين وما هو على الغيب بضنين وما هو بقول شيطان رجيم فأين تذهبون إن هو إلا ذكر للعالمين لمن شاء منكم أن يستقيم وما تشاءون إلا أن يشاء الله رب العالمين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا السماء انفطرت وإذا الكواكب انتثرت وإذا البحار فجرت وإذا القبور بعثرت علمت نفس ما قدمت وأخرت. يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم الذي خلقك فسواك فعدلك في أي صورة ما شاء ركبك كلا بل تكذبون بالدين وإن عليكم لحافظين كراما كاتبين يعلمون ما تفعلون. إن الأبرار لفي نعيم وإن الفجار لفي جحيم يصلونها يوم الدين وما هم عنها بغائبين. وما أدراك ما يوم الدين ثم ما أدراك ما يوم الدين يوم لا تملك نفس لنفس شيئا والأمر يومئذ لله. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. اللهم أنت السلام تباركت يا ذا. اللهم أعني على ذكرك. لا إله إلا الله. لا حول ولا قوة له النعمة. لا إله اللهم لا مانع لما أعطيت. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Inshallah, I just want to remind you and myself with something that happens sometimes in the masjid. What happens is when the congregational salah is going on and the imam is in ruku' and people enter the masjid, oftentimes they want to catch the ruku'. They want to catch the imam in ruku' before the imam comes up. So what sometimes people do is they run to catch the ruku'. And sometimes what people also do is they, as they are going into ruku', they say Allahu Akbar. There's such a rush to catch the ruku' that they actually say Allahu Akbar as they are going into ruku'. And both of those things are not proper. The Prophet ﷺ told us not to run to the prayer. Told us not to run to the prayer. When we come to the prayer, we come with waqar and sakina. We come with dignity and with tranquility and peace. And if we catch the imam in ruku', alhamdulillah. If we don't catch him in ruku', then we simply finish that rak'ah afterwards. But we do not come to salah running. And that also applies to driving. We shouldn't speed when we are coming to the masjid. Shouldn't speed when we're coming to the masjid. We shouldn't break the stoplight or the stop sign. We shouldn't be speeding in the parking lot of the masjid. It's very dangerous. And we should park in the proper space. We shouldn't park in the fire lane just to catch the ruku'. We shouldn't just throw our shoes anywhere and just, all of that is speed that is contrary to the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ. No, we come in, we go, we put our shoes where they need to go properly, and we walk to, alhamdulillah, it doesn't mean we're lazy, we're just, walking very, very slowly. That's also another extreme. No, we walk with concern that we want to catch the salah, but we don't run to salah. So there's a middle course that we have to strike. And the same thing applies also to if we come and the imam is in at the end of salah. Sometimes people rush and they want to catch him before he says salam. We should not run. But at the same time, the other extreme also is sometimes people come in and they see that the imam is about to say salam, so they just wait. So let him say the salam and we'll start a second jama'ah. That's also wrong. Because to catch the first jama'ah is better. Even if you just catch the salam, that's better than praying a second jama'ah from the beginning. The first jama'ah has a fadila, has a virtue that the second jama'ah does not have. So the proper thing to do is come in and walk with dignity and waqar and sakina, and Allahu Akbar, and you sit down, and if the imam then says salam, then you get up and you continue and you finish your salah, inshaAllah ta'ala. The other thing that I mentioned that people do that is wrong, that people come and they are going into ruku as they say Allahu Akbar. That's not proper. In fact, if you do it that way, then your salah may not even count. Because among the shurut of the arkan, so there's a shart of salah and there's shurutul arkan. So one of the arkan of salah, one of the first arkan of salah is takbiratul ihram. The first takbirah is a rukn of salah, meaning without this, the salah does not count. Takbiratul ihram is a rukn of salah. And the shart for this rukn to be performed properly is that it must be performed while standing up. If you can stand, obviously. If you can't stand, you have to sit. That's a different story. But if you can stand up, then you must perform this takbiratul ihram when you're standing up. So if you perform it as you're moving down, or if you're already in ruku, as you say takbiratul ihram, then it doesn't count. And by takbiratul ihram, we mean the statement Allahu Akbar, not the movement of the hand. the statement Allahu Akbar must be said, all of it, from the alif to the ra, Allahu Akbar, all of it must be said while we are standing straight. And then preferably we say another Allahu Akbar for the ruku'. Okay, that second Allahu Akbar is a sunnah. So if that is skipped, it's not as problematic, even though you're skipping a sunnah, which you shouldn't. So the proper way is to say Allahu Akbar with waqar and sakina and khushu', hopefully. And then to say another Allahu Akbar to go into ruku'. And if you're able to do all of that before the imam starts to rise from his ruku', then you've caught him in ruku'. But if by the time you do that he has already started to rise from ruku', then you have missed the rak'ah, and alhamdulillah, you just, insha'Allah ta'ala. So I just wanted to remind you of that, because I noticed that sometimes in our masjid here, less frequently, alhamdulillah, but especially in some of the other masajid in the area, I noticed that a lot. So inshallah, let's try our best to follow this advice from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as from the ulama of this deen. جزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.